And now, please welcome to the stage founder and Chief Executive Officer of the Vendry, Daphne Hoppenot, and President and Chief Executive Officer of MPI, Paul van Deventer, in discussion with Skift Meetings Editor-in-Chief, Miguel Neves.
Back. So this session is about the future of event industry communities. And I want to get a little bit of a show of hands as well. Who in the audience is an MPI member? All right, okay. And who is a user of the Vendry? All right, that's pretty close. I think the Vendry just tops it out. We are in New York, so it's a little...
It's like Elon versus Mark.
Perfect. So I have with me the CEO of MPI, one of the largest meeting professional bodies in the industry, 12,000 members, I believe, around that.
Yep.
And also the CEO of the Vendry, a venue and vendor marketplace, which looks like a lot of people in the room know, but you also have an active community around the Vendry. And I wanted to start with kind of talking about that first. This community, I know that you created the Vendry, essentially a venue marketplace before COVID happened, and it was all going well, and suddenly nobody needed to source any venues, and that's a problem. But you leaned in and you created a community, which is now, I think, the best part of it, or one of the parts of it, is a Slack channel, which I think has over 1,000 members, very active.
I thought you were going to say the best community.
Well, you did win the best vendor sourcing or venue and vendor sourcing platform for Skift meetings, so congratulations. But I thought this community was really interesting because you started it and you're not monetizing it. You started it as a way to kind of keep in touch with the users. And I guess my question is, how important is this community now for your business overall?
Totally. So we're a venture-backed company that originally sought out, and still it is our North Star, to build a venue marketplace for the industry. Is my mic not working? Okay. All right. Hello. And there's nothing like raising your first, $1 million of venture capital December 2019. If you recall, I literally was writing my first investor update. I'm like, hey, VCs, thanks for investing in a venue marketplace. There's a global pandemic. So the good news is, talk about serendipity. Like, if I had fundraised 6 weeks later, I definitely would not be here under the Vendry. But it was never our intention originally, no part of our business model, to build community. And to be totally honest, I didn't really know what to do. And I'd gotten to know a lot of people in this industry. And it gets a little bit to Miguel mentioning that we don't charge for our community. And if you look at the origins of our community, it comes from me having a lot of really depressing Zoom calls with people that I'd gotten to know and care. And I think everyone in this room knows what Zoom calls I'm talking about. And the thing is, I'm a tech person. Like, I was sitting there not really in the shoes of the people I was talking to, but caring deeply for them. And so I started organizing Zoom calls to bring those people together. I see many people in the room. I'm smiling at Erica, like just saying, hey, you are all great folks in the same position that I've gotten to know, so let me start bringing you all together. And those Zoom calls turned into, we had engineers on staff, so immediately we started building sort of technology to support this idea of community. And we've had over 60,000 people create accounts for the Vendry since those early days. And so we don't charge for community. A lot of our early rationale around building community was really not commercially driven. It was driven from the heart and really mission-oriented. And so we didn't charge early days. We don't charge today. And we make money with advertising. So there's other people that'll pay.
Paul, over to you. You've been leading MPI for 10 years now, just over 10 years?
Just over, yeah.
And MPI has chapters all over the world, clubs as well. How has the approach to community changed since you started at MPI?
It's dramatically changed, and the pandemic just accelerated that change. But if you think about professional associations, the core of them was this concept of membership. And when I got involved in MPI, there was already a dramatic shift in what was happening with professional associations. As new generations came into the workforce, they didn't look to associations the same way that other older generations had, and they were seeking more community, more networks. So we had to switch off the idea of focused around a core member and begin to build around a core community. So when you say we have 12,000 members, we do, but we have a very active community of 85,000 professionals who engage with MPI around the world. So we began that shift probably 7 or 8 years ago to talking about communities, getting active with communities. And then when Facebook really got active promoting their groups, and if you remember the whole ad campaign, We Want to Rock, and really fantastic campaign, that's sat around with our team and our board and said, we need to be building that kind of environment, that kind of self-driven, self-created community, so we can provide the platform and provide the network and enable people to bring their own communities together. And that's now been a focus for about 5 or 6 years, and the pandemic just accelerated it for all the reasons Daphne talked about.
So I think you were in this room when Ken was talking earlier from Freeman. He talked about the younger generations, the next generation of event goers. And one of the statistics he shared was quite interesting, that idea that events are this source of reliable information, but for young people, unfortunately, professional member associations seem to be dropping. Any comment on that, or how can you address something like that?
No, and I'm glad he gave at least the one factoid about the younger generation, because when he put that slide up, I said, I wish he would do this generationally and see where it fit. And then he talked about the one segment, but I think it gets to the fact that we need to build and focus around community, not necessarily association, and that association can come later. Associations are so much more relevant right now in our industry than pre-COVID, and they're more relevant because the other stuff Ken put up, and some of which he didn't talk about today, but other stats that Freeman's been putting out there. Our industry workforce is 10 years younger than it used to be 3 years ago. I mean, that's just crazy to think about that change. And it's 60+% new than it was 3 years ago. That requires a great deal of training. The best place for that training and education are associations. So whether it's MPI or other industry associations, we're encouraging and reaching out to all these new professionals coming in, whether they're new generation or whether they're people looking for a career change, and say, go to your association, build your network, seek education there, and stop talking about it as a membership group and more of a professional development group.
Interesting. So I know on the Vendry, you have this Slack channel that's incredibly active, and I believe it's a very kind of practical, I need something, can you help me find this kind of thing. I mean, planners are busy, right? Do you think that they have time for more than just sourcing and finding things and they're looking for a wider thing, or is community really about being useful to each other?
Yeah, I mean, we have dozens of Slack messages daily. We do host our digital community on Slack, and 90+% of those messages are asking questions about suppliers. And so, you can think the Vendry is a venture-backed company trying to build a marketplace for sourcing suppliers, venues, and vendors. And then during the pandemic, we built this community. And as it turns out, our community platform was 90+% of the time being used for the same purpose that our core marketplace was our website was originally intended for. And so it turns out that, funny enough, we sort of realized this community thing we built post-pandemic, especially as live events came back, I'm repeating myself, but was being used basically as a marketplace. And so I think the testament of the many Vendry users in the room is that planners are always seeking personal and professional development and growth, but in a digital forum, we see that most of the case it's very tactical. And we look at our community as really being about knowledge sharing. And so we host dinners, we host live events for that sort of more thought leadership, but we always look to grow our community and bring great people into it so that when people post questions, they get answers, right? In a way, it's a marketplace. When somebody posts a question, are they getting great answers in response in a timely manner?
That sounds like a great use of AI. We just did a session on AI.
Yeah.
Is that going to be part of how you manage
Absolutely.
This community?
Absolutely. I mean, we are, again, 50% of our team are product engineering, and so we're naturally inclined to be thinking about everything we do through the lens of technology, and we're on the AI train just like everyone else. So when we, many people have mentioned this in the speeches today, but we look at our community as a knowledge sharing platform. The most important thing for anybody to be able to build interesting products with AI is access to data. And if you want to have a moat, that's proprietary data. And so when we look at our community, and especially, again, both our discussion forums and also live roundtables that we host, and we always try to be very transparent with the community. So provide private channels and public channels where they can be very clear where their words or what they're typing could be used in a more public context. But that is a data corpus that is proprietary to the Vendry, and that we use AI to basically read the data. Here's a simple example. If somebody posts in the Vendry, what's something that you've posted for recently in the Vendry? I see an active user here.
I was looking for photographers in the Dallas area. We have a roadshow.
There you go. There you go. So posted for photographers in Dallas, a bunch of people respond. What we can actually do is use the Slack API to pipe that data into our core database, use a mixture of API with some human review to associate the photographers I would mention to the specific post of that discussion, and now bring that data into our marketplace so that community members searching on the Vendry for photographers in Dallas see both all of sort of the factual data that we have with the relevant community discussions in that search result.
So to clarify, does that mean that the AI is sort of helping the user, in your case, find the information that maybe they didn't know where to look for in the Vendry, or are you going further? Are you sort of then notifying photographers in Dallas that somebody's searching for photographers in Dallas?
We're not doing that use case yet. Right now, AI can be used in different ways. Right now, we're using AI to basically associate structured data to unstructured data, which is those conversations. But one thing you could imagine is that in the Slack community, which we've had a lot of success with Slack, so I think we'll stick with that platform, we could build a Slack bot where the next time somebody posts for photographers in Dallas, you have the community conversation jumping in as people check the notification, have something to say, but there's a Slack bot that says like, hey, by the way, here's who's been recommended previously, and like here's a link to their website, and here's their contact information. And so we could build our own sort of AI-enabled chatbot to interject itself in that forum.
An AI memory for conversation.
Exactly, and that's where you see Slack, which was bought by Salesforce, making a massive investment in AI, because Slack or Microsoft Teams, any of those forums are in the end like the most robust knowledge base you have for any community that's being hosted on there.
It sounds like we all end up using AI, even if we're not aware of it.
Totally, and that's,
We've all been using it.
Yeah, exactly, we're already using it. So I want to jump for a completely different topic now. One of the things we talk about is kind of, the pragmatic need for something like the Vendry Slack channel, that kind of like, I need something, that's kind of like the driver of that. And associations and professional bodies being sort of on the other side. And one of the things during COVID, there was this real need to represent the industry with government. There was a need to sort of fly the flag of the planner with industries and with government people that didn't necessarily understand the industry. And my concern is that, how are we better prepared today, and what is the role of MPI and other associations in playing that role? And if there is another crisis, are we better prepared today to kind of go to government and tell them the help that we need and what we need to survive?
Me?
Yeah, that's you, Paul.
Not me.
So I would say when I came on board 10 years ago, one of the biggest challenges our industry had was to communicate the value of our industry, tell the story of face-to-face events and the power of innovation, creativity, advancements that occur in these environments. COVID told the story for us. What we weren't able to do for decades, COVID actually did it. So we were actually graced by that from COVID. What we now have, I think, a bigger challenge in front of us, and a number of speakers already have talked to this, is how to now tell the story of the professional opportunities within this industry. We've had a massive turnover in our industry, and we still have a massive workforce shortage. So I look to associations to speak together around how we can reach out to new professionals to bring them into this industry. And more importantly, thinking further down the road, how we get into the mindset at the junior high, high school level of this is a premier career choice. It is not an enabler into another career. And if you think about today's environment of guidance counselors, junior achievement, academia overall, the messaging is, hey, you have a choice in life. You can go a professional track and go to college and become a lawyer or a doctor. You can follow a government track, work in the military, go in a government organization and work in that path. Or you can go to trade school and be great career as a plumber, a tradesman, a carpenter. But when you're on your way there, just go wait on tables or work at a hotel to get you to that career. What we have to get the message across is you want to be innovative, you want to be creative, you want to be a tech person, you want to be an accountant, you want to be a salesperson. There are amazing careers within hospitality. And there are fantastic careers within that segment in business events. And we all have to get together to tell that story. And I think that's our newest, biggest challenge right now. The industry, the value of the industry is now known. We now have to get the right people to serve the industry.
So we have a number, we have a target, but we need to convince everybody that they want to be part of that.
Yes, correct.
So one of the stories that we've been covering on Skift meetings a lot is this idea that maybe there's too many associations. Maybe there's too many bodies, and they get a bit scattered. And I wanted to get an audience kind of impression here. Wanted to raise your hand if you think that maybe there's too many associations and they should merge, or there should be less associations out there. A few brave souls, a few hands, okay? On the other hand, does anybody in the room feel that there aren't enough associations? And what I mean by that is not so much we need more associations, but there isn't an association that represents me, my role in the industry, that I need maybe a body that would represent me. Anyone? Maybe? Okay. I'd like to start with you, Paul. Do you think that there's too many associations? Because I know we've had this conversation before, and it keeps coming back, but it keeps changing a little bit, right?
Well, first I'll start with, I was not a real association person until I took this job. I, in my career, had spent time with MBTA, now GBTA, but wasn't really active. And in other points in my career, wasn't really involved in associations. When I came into this role, I was astounded by the number of associations there are in the world. Tens of thousands in the US. There's an association for everything. There's an association for the tablecloths. There's an association for carpeting. There's an association for lights. Everything you can think of, there's an association for.
And they all do events.
And they all do events. That's the beauty of it. Within our industry, since I walked in here 10 years ago, I was trying to learn about what an association is and the value it delivers. I also was hearing a lot. And mostly it's, the conversation is brought by the folks who fund the associations in our world, that there's too many of you. Whether it's hoteliers or tech companies, in their mind, well, if I have to fund PCMA's conference and then MPI's conference, why don't you just get together and have one conference, and then I only have to fund one and you can all be together. So the noise usually comes from those writing the checks to fund the association. It's not coming a lot from the people in the associations. And the argument I've had back to them is that this isn't my association. It's your association, it's the members, it's the communities. If they want to merge it with someone else, it's up to them to do that. Mm-hmm. And what I have seen, though, as I study the history of this industry, is once you start merging and getting bigger, individuals feel they're no longer being heard, and they're going to create new associations, and they're going to spin off, and they're going to have their own segments. So I don't think merging them is the right end game. Mm-hmm. I think each of us, in our own way, and we're all trying to, need to understand how to provide a more personalized experience within our association. And if we can do that effectively, whether it's in creating groups, communities, smaller network opportunities, that's where we're going to be successful.
Interesting.
I have a quick follow-up on that, which I think it's interesting. Very few members of the Vendry have ever affiliated with an association. And I think that, we have a lot of event marketers, a lot of people in the more experiential world, agencies, folks that haven't traditionally identified with the word meeting. Like, actually very few people in our community would call themselves meeting managers. I think that's a branding issue. We're sitting up here talking about how meetings is not a sexy industry. You know what's sexy? Like, everyone in our community probably started this because they were at Coachella thinking, I want to work in this industry. I mean that. Like, there's something seriously wrong when, for the experiential generation, we're saying this industry isn't sexy. But one thing I'll also agree with Paul is, and I stress about this with the Vendry, is as we get bigger, and I mentioned thinking about our own community as a marketplace, right? I'll give you an example. Last week, 2 people posted asking for photographers in Orlando. So one thing, AI chatbot needs to connect those discussions. 2, I don't think either of them got responses. And so I'm always thinking about growing our community so that when somebody posts a question, they get lots of great answers. But I worry about growing because I worry that as we grow, even in this online form, it starts feeling anonymous, people start seeking smaller communities, feels more trusted, intimate, and so there's that balance that a challenge we all have.
Yeah, we run a group on LinkedIn for almost 500,000 planners of some sort, and yeah, it's not easy to have that sense of community.
Yeah.
But
I think you're right, though, about the branding. And
Yeah,
you know, whether we
this
call
industry is
whether
so
it's the
sexy.
experience industry, we're a marketing function.
Yeah.
And you know, if you just even start there and talk about it as this is a career in marketing, right there you're going to start to appeal to a different audience.
it's a different conversation.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about your business model, because
Yep.
I know we talked a while back, and you were initially very focused on user-funded. You know,
Yep.
sort of our users are going to pay for our services, but now you've changed to a model of being supplier-funded.
Yep.
And that's quite a big pivot. How do you make sure that you focus on the user needs and don't get driven by the sponsor and the vendor needs?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I come from a B2B SaaS background, and I was so intellectually interested and curious to solve what I really see as a venue sourcing problem in our industry, and sort of leaned on my natural inclination to try to do that through SaaS. And so we built an RFP tool. We built this whole sort of platform to serve planners as they were sourcing suppliers. And we brought it to market. And we have big customers that pay us an annual SaaS fee for that software. We launched that, and then basically last January, the economy started going downwards. All these big companies, a lot of our clients were big tech companies, started doing massive layoffs, and I started getting honestly a little bit worried about that revenue stream, and started looking at our support tickets. And as it turns out, our support tickets were full of suppliers emailing us asking if they could advertise. And so we spun up an advertising product akin to what Cvent has for hotels, you know, paid listings, display ads. We have promotional opportunities across our platform, and that sort of is off to the races. And so we are leaning into that advertising or that commercial model for now, while not taking off the table that we would go back to focusing on sort of procurement software or something that is more planner funded.
Okay, interesting. Last question for you, Paul. A few years ago now, I think maybe 5 years ago, you bought Plan Your Meetings. Big deal for MPI.
About 7 years.
About 7 years ago now,
Yeah.
excellent. And you chose to incorporate it into MPI, so you kind of merged it in. You brought the planners in as MPI members, or you did your best to, right? I know PCMA has taken a different approach. They acquired SEMA and the Event Marketing Association. They're kind of running those separately. My question is really, would you do that again? Do you feel it was a successful acquisition, and would you do that kind of thing again?
If the exact scenario presented itself, it was a very good opportunity for MPI, and it made a lot of sense at the time. And looking back on it, it still makes a lot of sense. I think there's many ways. Every acquisition is different. Every merger is different. And in that particular area, I talked earlier about the fact we were shifting our focus into expanding community as opposed to membership. Plan Your Meetings brought two very large community segments we hadn't been involved with before. One of the ones is the one you talked about, what they called untitled planners, people who plan, but it's not necessarily in their title. And then a lot of planning gets done through administrative assistants, and there was no one reaching out to them, and they had a big market there. So they brought 2 big markets to us and helped expand our community significantly. They also had programs, event schedules, and media content that were new to us, and we brought those in-house and have leveraged them. So it worked out very well for us.
So you would do the same again?
Yeah.
Okay, good to hear. Well, that's all we have time for, Paul.
That's it.
Daphne, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for being with us today. Hope you enjoyed it, and have some more content for you.